something that would help me prepare for this session or to dictate how the session will go, could you maybe, everybody, write something in the chat about your experience with numbers and what you'd like to see in this session? I can do complete beginner's introduction. I can go into some more advanced stuff. I'm able to change what we do based on that. So if you're going to follow along and you're interested in this session, just tell me what you'd like to see, and I'll try and incorporate what you've asked for.
Thanks, Christian. I think with that, we'll open the session. So hi, everyone. I hope everyone's well. And I'll pass on to Christian, who's going to lead this. So we have the numbers training workshop in this session. Thanks, Christian.
Thanks, Chris. I thought I might get a couple of minutes to take in some of the responses there, but yeah. So hello, everyone. I'm Christian Lawson-Perfect. I'm the lead developer of Numbas, based at Newcastle University. So this session it's billed as numbers training. I've done lots and lots of training sessions over the years. We can do, I'll certainly do, at least for a little bit, a brief introduction into what numbers is. Looks like we've got lots of beginners here, so that's good. I think I'll just stick with the standard plan. So we'll go with that. I've got some slides. I'll do a bit of talking, and then we'll do some playing around with numbers. I'd like this session to be interactive. Please interrupt me. You can write questions on the Moodle site if you want maybe a more in-depth answer later on. But if there's something that you see you want me to talk about, then just interrupt. While I'm sharing my screen, I'm not sure I'll be able to see the chat, so just unmute yourself if that's what you want to do. Otherwise, Chris, I think, who's chairing the session, will tell me if there's something I need to respond to. Okay, so that said, let's find my slides. I've had quite a fun day today. I was on the metro 30 minutes ago writing these slides. Oh, it says numbers update. That's already the wrong thing. This is numbers training. Okay, so my plan, this is where I was going to stall for time. I think what we're going to do is just do a beginner's introduction into numbers, and then a bit of a demo. So numbers is, there's been some references to it already in EAMS this year, and there have been talks in previous EAMS about numbers. Numbers is an open source web-based e-assessment tool aimed at numerate disciplines. Development is pretty much all contained within the School of Maths, Stats and Physics here at Newcastle. The impetus for Numbers was to provide in-course assessment in our Maths and Stats degree. So that's really where it's focused on. The main features of Numbers, I'll compare it to other e-assessment systems, since we're all, I think, experienced with some kind of e-assessment. Many of you are new to Numbers here today. So the points of Numbers compared to other things are it's scalable. The way it works is a Numbers test runs entirely in the student's web browser. There's no backend server doing the marking. So that means that it's very straightforward to run tests with large numbers of students. And that has a lot of other benefits as well, like absolutely immediate feedback. There's no back and forth waiting for a server to calculate something. Reliability is important. We at Newcastle, before Numbers existed, had bad experiences with systems that would break or fall over with too many students, or just bugs and things. So that's an important goal. And accessibility is, as always, for me, been a personal interest, and also now it's the law in the UK that we have to ensure accessibility for more people than a lazy developer might have bothered with in the past. So that is, of course, a goal. Ease of use, I think, is a notable design goal of Numbers. I think both for students and for people writing Numbers material, lecturers, instructors. So being able to get started without being an expert in the system is an important goal. The big benefit of online assessment is being able to get automatic feedback. So being able to give specific feedback is an important goal in Numbers. There are a few different ways of reacting to what the student has entered and giving some specific feedback, changing exactly how much credit you award for different kinds of answer, that kind of thing. And then finally, because maths is a really, really big subject, I think a lot of use of e-assessment is focused on those stage 1 transition to university topics that are pretty standard across the world, like intro calculus, some algebra, but maths is way bigger than that, and it's nice to use e-assessment for more subjects in maths. We use it right through the degree course here, and in order to do that, you need to do stuff that you'd never expect a system to have everything built in. So being able to extend numbers, being able to change how it works is really important. You can change a lot, and going back to ease of use, I've really tried hard to make it so that you can change how things work without going into writing code too often. There's a lot you can do within the graphical editor. And finally, I think it's worth mentioning how numbers tests work. Way back when, 10, 11 years ago when we started, SCORM was the big standard. So numbers exams are SCORM packages, which means they can be delivered in lots of places. You can just give students a link to a web page if you don't care about getting data back from them, or tie in very easily to learning systems like Moodle, Blackboard, Canvas, there is also a, oh, sorry, I've just clicked and I didn't mean to click. There's also an LTI tool, which provides a lot of good features, which I may get into showing. Okay, I've just spotted in the chat, Konstantina has asked, she said, I've started using JSX graph on Stack and wondering if it's possible to share snippets of code between Numbers and Stack. Has anyone used both systems? So Vesna, I think that her talk was last week. They've used Numbers and Stack around Southampton. For JSX graph, I think the bits of JavaScript to create graphs could be carried across. In Numbers, I prefer, again, to avoid code and to make stuff easier to use. There are other ways of making JSX graph diagrams in Numbers that avoid JavaScript and I think are a little bit simpler, a bit more straightforward, which we might get onto. Okay, so that's a rough idea of the aims of Numbers. I think ease of use, extensibility, and being easy to get started. You can start creating number stuff and you can deliver it to students without too much outlay or institutional support. You don't need much from your IT department. So I'll describe how we use Numbers. At Newcastle, before students even get here, there's a pre-entry course for students who don't have the qualifications we expect. So we are geared up to take students who've done English A-levels, and I guess Scottish Highers don't cause us much trouble, but students from elsewhere that have other qualifications that don't directly map, we make them do a pre-entry course. A lot of the material in that is Numbers tests. And I think maybe the summative exam for it is as well. When students get here, they have a diagnostic test, in maths certainly, and I think maybe in engineering too. And then throughout courses, throughout modules here, we have banks of formative material available for students to access whenever they like. We have in-course assessments where they're given a week to make one attempt at some material, or maybe timed assessments. A lot of that has changed with lockdown. We're doing lots of different ways of delivering assessment. My colleagues in the more scientific subjects who actually touch physical things as part of their training, they have labs and they use Numbers to support labs. They might get students to take a load of data, enter it into Numbers, and then they have whatever work they have to do with it, decisions, calculations, that's marked automatically. And then at the end of modules, we run quite a few final exams through Numbers, either entirely automatically marked or with some automatically marked questions, and then some questions that students submit their work, their handwritten work, through our Canvas VLE. So just a taste of some of the subjects using Numbers. I think this is at Newcastle, certainly, that we're aware of, not just maths and stats, but a load of other vaguely numerate disciplines. And here are some stats about how widely used Numbas is. There's no tracking code in Numbas exams themselves, so we don't know exactly how many exams there are in use, but using the public editor, we can guess that there's over 1,000, over 1,500 institutions around the world using Numbas, or at least have looked at it. There's over 8,000 users registered on the editor, and they've released almost 10,000 questions and exams under a Creative Commons license. Not everything on the editor has to be released under an open license. There's just over 100,000 items in the database, so it's quite widely used. Okay, so I'll switch to a quick demo, and if you saw last week the trouble I was having with my laptop, I've obtained a MacBook, and we'll see if I can get my head around how it works. I haven't tested this yet. Right, so this is the demo exam that's available on the Numbas website. There'll be a link to that at the end of my slides. That's available through the conference Moodle as well. And this is what you would see if you click the demo link there. So this is a Numbas exam in menu mode. It's got a selection of questions, and I can just go in and pick whichever one I want to have a go at. This is really good for formative material. For homeworks or for summative exams, we use the sequential mode, where students are shown a list of questions, and they work through question 1, question 2, so on. Right. A Numbas question consists of some statement text at the top. This isn't a real question, so it doesn't do too much. And then a number of parts where you ask the student to enter some kind of answer, and you give them some points, give them some feedback. And I'm moving bits of Zoom interface around. Oh, that seems to have worked nicely. Each part is made from one of the part types. There are number entry, maths expression. You can take a matrix. You can take plain text, which I've never used. And then there's a variety of multiple choice question types as well. There's loads of options for these. I think it might have come up in one of the free chat sessions last week that multiple choice questions are a lot more complicated than you'd think at first glance. So Numbas can do a lot with those. And what else is there? Oh, there's some custom part types. So if there's time and if there's interest, I might get onto how you can make your own part types in Numbas. Right, so the way it works, I have a question here. Give myself, I think, an easy question to answer live. So that's how it works. You enter an answer, you press submit part, you get some feedback. That's the basics. So you can set up a question using these built-in part types where you just really say what answer you expect to see, and it can give tick or a cross, or you can get more complicated and look for different kinds of feedback. Writing mathematical expression. I know this comes up a lot, that thinking about how students enter mathematical expressions. In Numbas, it's you just type in a text box and you get a rendering next to the box to show what's been understood. We have a getting started test that tells students the syntax. Like it's not at all obvious if you've never seen it before that the hat character gets you a superscript. But let's get this wrong. But there you go. So you type that. If you get an invalid expression, it will tell you that it's wrong. And Numbas will refuse to mark an invalid answer, and that won't count as a submission. It's important to, I know Chris Sanguine bangs on about this every time he talks about Stack, to separate validity and correctness. So there we go. Can I get this right? There we go. Yeah, there we go. So looking around, one of the really great benefits of computer assessment is the ability to randomize in a numbers question, you do that by setting up question variables. You can define those just as like pick a number from a range, or you can define one variable in terms of others, combinations, do some calculation with them. There's a very big library of functions to do pretty much whatever you'd want to do. Okay, so let's try and pick some randomization. Which of these look like they have been randomized? No, that says 1/4 and 3/12. Have a look. And that's fixed as well. Somewhere in this demo is a randomized question. I think a lot of these are static, so that they look the same. So I'll just talk quickly about writing numbers. You can ask the student to write just an integer. If I write 169.0, what do I say? That's fine. You can insist on a certain amount of precision. So if I write this to the wrong precision, I just enter what I'm given, I can take some marks away, and that was configurable. If you give partial credit, no credit, whatever. There's that. And I'm aware that not everyone uses the same notation for writing numbers, so that you can configure that. And this is going to use what I've called continental European style. There doesn't seem to be any name for any standard name for. Oh, that's not set up right. I need a dot here, do I? There we go. There are no standard names for these styles of things, but when you're in the editing interface, it explains to you what they mean. Right, so let's not dwell too long on this demo. What will I skip to next? We'll go to some of the more complicated stuff. So there's some things here. It's a good idea if you've got a computer to use all the power of the computer. So stick an illustration in, fine. You can put in diagrams in the SVG format. That's a vector graphics format that most programs will produce. And Numbers can put in random variables into those. So these are some random numbers picked for this question, and I'll go and this was a good one to try another question like this. So those numbers change each time this question is made up. And that's really useful. I know a lot of, again, the scientists do more interesting stuff technologically than us. If you have a diagram and you want to like label edge lengths or I don't know, stuff on a diagram you want to label, that's a really handy thing to be able to do and quite straightforward to set up. I've just looked at the chat and seen Constantina wrote something back when I was writing mathematical expressions. I'll come back to it. There are quite a few ways of making interactive or randomly generated diagrams in Numbers. One is JSXGraph, which again, we've seen quite a lot at EAMS. Here is an interactive question where I have to write a formula for basically a projectile. I'm given, again, some random bits. I'll see if I can remember how to do this. So 59t. And as I type, this expression is drawing, or the diagram is drawing the plot of my expression that I gave. So 59t looks like this line here. And I'm going to deliberately get this wrong. So I've put a plus there instead of a minus, and it looks bad. It's a really good idea. A really big benefit of interactive graphing is being able to get some immediate feedback, and it helps cement the link between expressions and the graphical form. And I think it was much more obvious graphically that this was wrong than it was in the algebraic form. So that's a benefit of using a computer. There we go. So I've got that one right. You can also include Geogebra. So if you haven't used it, Geogebra is a really good dynamic geometry package. It's used for all sorts of things, actually. It's I think, used a lot more at secondary and maybe primary levels than in universities. But it's fairly straightforward in Numbers to, if you make a worksheet in Geogebra, then to embed it into a Numbers diagram. And again, you can make a link from the diagram to an answer input and vice versa. I might later on show some of the more complicated JSX graph stuff. I did some more work on that, and it's really straightforward to set up some really nice interactions. Then finally, there's a tool called Euclides, which is it was a scripting language developed probably 20 years ago now that I think is a really good way of creating quite strict, clear diagrams fairly easily. So I've translated that code into JavaScript, and it's now a Numbers extension, and I can make things that make this interactive. I can I move that around. There we go. Yeah. So again, that's a nice thing. And of course, you can embed videos. Back when we started on Numbers, we have a library of a couple of hundred videos of my retired colleague Robin Johnson working through examples, and we would just chuck those in as illustrations to help students. Right. I'll come back to that question there about from Konstantina about mathematical expressions. You asked, is the multiplication symbol optional? Yes, it is. And I get, coming from Stack, there's an option in Stack to, do you want to insist on that multiplication sign or not? The view I take around these is to try and fit with the existing convention. And really, I think the multiplication symbol is optional, it can be omitted quite a lot, and it's important to accept what students would write. So there's no option to make it require it, because something like 2x without a symbol between it wouldn't mean anything. There are lots of options around. If you write like x, y together, this is set up at the moment. Numbers would think that's a single name of a single variable called x, y, and you could instead configure it to interpret that as x times y and not require that multiplication symbol. Because as you see, while the display did change between those, most students wouldn't attend to that. Konstantina, you've got your hand up. Yeah.
Yes. So how you distinguish between writing a function, I don't know, y of x into parentheses, and if it's like y times x?
I'll show you the options. Let's call this English 20. Typing. Problem with using a new laptop is the keyboard is a slightly different size. You're always half a key off. Right.
Imagine using a laptop from a different country that all the letters are different places.
Oh yeah, yeah, I've had that before. Right. So where's the option here? So I'm going to set this up first of all. I need to set the answer is x times y, maybe. I don't know. So there are some options around. Do you let the student use variable names that aren't in the expected answer? That can be another way of catching that they've done something weird. You force single letter variable names is the thing, like is it x, y as a single object or x times y implicitly? If you turn off allow unknown function names, then when you have like y bracket, do I need to make this a bit bigger? When you have y bracket something, that could be a function if you allow an unknown function name, but if you turn that off, y is not a function, so it's interpreted as y times something something. And this implicit function composition, I'll turn that on. That's for cases where you have something like sine, cos, which we've seen students do. So instead of it being sine times cos or sin cos x, whatever, it takes that as being sine of cos of x.
Well, if it was sine times cos, it would have been sine x cos x.
Exactly. But the notation around functions and brackets is there's so many mutual inconsistencies with those things. Certainly, since we introduced these options, it's helped a lot of those kinds of mistakes that students make. Right, and what you can do if you want to really take a broad view of what students could type, you could have alternative versions of your part with different options set up to catch different ways students might write answers. You might want to give them a hint, or you might want to just give them the marks and say, that's it. Okay, coming back through, Rebecca has asked, can you interact with the GeoGebra, like making them draw a point and evaluating if it's the right one? Yeah, certainly can. I don't know if the demo here does that. There is a demo in the demos project. Oh, I'm trying to get around all of the Zoom interface as well as this. So GeoGebra. What should we ask? So mark a point is correct if the student moves the point to the right position. I think that's my minimal example of an interactive GeoGebra worksheet. So I'm told some coordinates to move this point to, -1, -2, and oh, I've scrolled the wrong place. Submit that answer. So that's right. And I've programmed in some extra feedback here just to tell me where my point is. So I could move that over there. Yeah. So yeah, you can do a lot with GeoGebra. Oh, and I see Timo's given a link to that. Thanks, Timo. Okay, carrying on. I've mentioned the idea of alternative answers. This solves a few problems in Numbers. There are a few use cases for this. One is you set up a question and there are some mistakes you expect a student to make, and you would like to give them some feedback that's specific to that. So you can say, if they enter this answer, then they've probably made this kind of mistake. So you can use alternative answers for that. What it is it's a copy of the part type, and you can change any of the settings you like. When the student submits an answer, it marks against the standard settings. If they get full credit, lovely. Otherwise, it goes through each of the alternatives you've set up. And whichever one awards the most credit, that's the one that gets picked, and the feedback is given to the student. And that credit then is separate from the marks that the student would eventually see. You can multiply that by a factor so that they get half partial marks for it, or they get no marks, but they do get this nice feedback message. What this question here is showing is awarding different numbers of marks for approximate answers. So I've got two 4-digit numbers to add up here. I can't do that at a glance, but I can certainly add up the first two, the leading digits, and get something that I think is within 1,000 of the right answer. So I submit that. And there's an alternative answer here that just has the range of acceptable answers widened to accept anything within 1,000 of the right answer. And then if I try and home in, I think 700-800 will get me a bit closer. So I get more and more marks as I get closer. And I think 74. Nope. There we go. That's the right answer. Yeah, and again, that's something that came in, I think, in response to students asking for partial marks. Students really don't like, if you have, particularly if it's a question worth a lot of marks, they don't like getting all or nothing. Adaptive marking is another feature that was introduced around that, which has then turned out to be useful for other things. But the idea is, if you have a question with several steps, like this one, first of all, I'm told just to add 2 numbers up, really. And I think I can do that. Yeah, so that's the right answer. But suppose I got that wrong. The next part then asks me to say, how much will all that cost? That's a different thing to do. And I really want to assess if the student can do this, not that they can do both this and then that. So the way adaptive marking works is there's a question variable that holds whatever this sum should have been, and then it's multiplied by the cost to get the right answer for this. For adaptive marking, it takes the student's answer and replaces the variable with that value, and works out a new expected answer. If you see that, then you get the marks. So here it says this part was marked using your answers to previous parts. So I know that this isn't the real right answer, and if I press reveal answers, the real answer is 9.9. Oh, I haven't set that up to go to 2 decimal places. But nevertheless, I've done this bit right. I know I've done that calculation right, and that's really important for students that it really helps you know where you've gone wrong anyway, apart from anything else. I could see a question from Frosina. Was the alternate answer coded as a range, or is it coded based on the difference, how far the answer is from the correct value? I think the way I did it, I just had the correct answer plus or minus 1,000, but you could do it that way as well. You could say 7,002 or 7,200, whatever. Yeah, you just I wrote out an expression in terms of the correct answer. Right, more stuff. In fact, I didn't read my first slide here. There's more stuff in Numbers than I could possibly show you in an hour. So I will show you briefly some things. I'm keeping an eye on the time, and I will at some point ask what we want to go into more detail on. Something else that's really good in Numbers, and I think the people that have tried it have said, suddenly start rewriting everything using this. It's Explore mode. And this came out of wanting to have more choice for the student in formative material particularly, but I know some colleagues are using it as part of their in-course assessment as well for certain cases. The idea is that rather than showing the student a big list of parts to do all at once, which would necessarily have to be fixed because you can't just go swapping out bits of the page, you show them one part at a time, and then you show them some options for other ways to go. You can show them an option before they've entered an answer or after. So here's one example of that. This is an experiment about probability, and it's guiding me, the student, through the process of designing an experiment to test a probability question. Is if I've got a coin, how do I tell if it's fair? Well, what I might do is flip it a load of times and then see if it, based on the results of that, decide if it's fair or not. So it will take some questions from some input data from me. I'm going to say I'm going to flip my coin 5 times. And each time I enter an answer, this can set the value of a question variable, which is then used in the subsequent parts. The next question is, if I flip it 5 times, how many times would it have to come up heads for me to think that the coin is biased? So I would say anything more than a half, but we'll go with, I reckon, 5. And then I'm asked to enter my data. So let's suppose I've entered, I've flipped a coin 5 times, and I got heads, tails. This here uses a custom marking algorithm to interpret that, and it produces a list of 5 true or false values. I can show you how custom marking algorithms work in a bit, if necessary. So this is, I've entered a load of free data here. I was free to choose a lot of this stuff. Actually, one thing this bit is doing is it's checking that it matches what I said before. If I enter too many or not enough answers, then it says no. So yeah, and if I stick a B in, then again, it gives me the wrong thing. So yeah, in order to move on, I have to get it right. Now, finally, not finally, we're only halfway through. It says I have to work out what percentage of those are heads, because I was asked earlier on what percentage would make it biased. So if I can't do that, when I developed this, if I did this 100 times, it's not easy to count those up. So I can have a hint here. I haven't entered an answer yet, and that's an option. And I can lose a mark for doing that. I've got a hint. So here's a little table of frequencies, which I can use to work out the percentage. So I think it was 60. There we go. So now that I've done that, I get another option. Is the coin biased? And now the marking here, there's no fixed answer. It entirely depends on what I said earlier. So if I say yes, it will tell me that doesn't match what I said earlier. And I haven't programmed in some specific feedback there, but I could have done. So yeah, the right answer is no. So people use Explore Mode for that. It's really good for these kind of lead you through an experiment thing. What I called it originally when I was designing was choose your own adventure mode. So you could give the student a couple of different methods of solving a problem. And once they've picked a method, you show them the appropriate inputs to show what they've done. Tim has given me a helpful suggestion about what I could show in the editor, which I will get onto. Yeah, you could also just use Explore Mode for offering a selection of hints. So you might want a slight hint that takes off 1 mark, or you might want a really in-depth breakdown of exactly what you need to do to answer a question, which would take off a few more marks. Finally, before I switch to the editor, I'll show you a couple of extensions. There are quite a few extensions now that add functionality into Numbers. One of them is something I did when we had students writing a lot of word problems and they had named characters. In order to make those names representative of our students, I went and got a data set of baby names from the UK from the past 20 years and bundled it into an extension. So you get a statistically representative name in your question. So you get the kinds of questions that you wouldn't come up with on your own, which I think is a really important equality and diversity and everything point. Apart from anything, you can ensure you get a fairly even split of he and she, which it turns out our students didn't do even when I told them to. And one other extension, again prompted by our science colleagues, is being able to enter numbers with units attached. So you can ask for a quantity and it just checks the dimensions right. So I can say kilograms or grams, or you can say if what you're assessing is conversion between equivalent units, say here that it has to be meters rather than centimeters. Yeah, so that's good. Right, so I'm going to switch over to the editor now. Masood has asked a really good question. Can you give partial marks if the student makes more than 1 attempt? And it's a principle in Numbers that you don't get penalized for submitting an answer. You can always change your answer. You can limit the number of attempts a student can make at a whole exam. So the way we do it is, if we don't want students to just repeatedly change their answer until it's right, we turn off immediate feedback. We say they only get feedback after they've finished the attempt or after a certain date has passed if we need to do moderation and things. But it is, I think, important that you let students change their answer while they're in the interface, because they might accidentally press submit or they might just change their mind. I think it adds a level of anxiety if you're limited in the number of times you can submit. Yeah, so that's a viewpoint on that. So this is the Numbers question editor. Actually, did I have some slides about these? Yeah, so I'll just talk about it quickly. There's the address. It's the important thing to show, numbas.mathscentre.ac.uk. That's available for everyone to use. You can either browse the database of existing questions, or you can create your own. And everything you might want to do is available within the web-based editor. Timo wanted me to show the interface for making variables. I'll do that. So I need to design a question first of all to pick what I'm going to do. I will point you towards the documentation because we've only got a couple of minutes before I want to start taking questions. There is documentation of, I think it's pretty complete, and it's very thorough documentation of everything to do with numbers, and there are some good tutorials on getting started that will take you through creating your account and then writing your first question. And the prompt for the tutorial is to make that question that I answered earlier, where you say you eat some number of apples per day. How many apples do you eat per week? So that's a good structure to go for. So I'll make a variable to say we're going to randomize the number of apples per day. I could call it n, but I'm not going to because I like my future self and I want my future self to understand what it means. So I'm going to call it apples per day. And there are a few different helpers for creating variables in numbers. JME code is the name of the language that Numbers uses for randomizing stuff and dealing with mathematical expressions internally, but I can just pick a random number from a range, and then I've got this nice interface for a random number between, let's say, what's a reasonable number of apples to eat per day? What was your max, Chris? Did you get up to a 6-pack in one day?
Oh, easily 6-pack in working hours, yeah.
So there we go. I've got my variable over here. I'm zoomed in a bit, so that's wrapped off. There we go. I get shown a generated value for this variable. When you've got lots of variables that all depend on each other, just being able to see what kind of values they produce is really handy, and being able to see that instantly. I can press this button to make up some new ones. When a student runs a question, it generates a new set of variables for them based on these definitions. I can give a description for each variable. It's really good to document what you're doing, and Numbers encourages you to do that all over the place. When you come back to a question that you wrote last year or one that somebody else wrote last year, it's not always obvious how everything works. So it's a good idea to write down what you're doing. I've given this variable a pretty good name, if I say so, but I'll just write out a full sentence here. There you go. Now I want to ask the student how many apples I eat per week. So I can make another variable here and say it's apples per day. Oh, and I get autocomplete, so I can run that times 7. And there we go. I can see over here that that checks out. In fact, what I'll do is I will get rid of this part. I don't want that one anymore. I want the number entry part. And I'll say that a number entry part takes a minimum and a maximum accepted value. So you can accept a range of things, but here it's whole numbers, and all I want is the exact value. There we go. So that's the right answer for that. There we go. So you can do much more complicated stuff. You end up having all chains of variable definitions in terms of each other. And again, there's good documentation about what's possible. There's hundreds and hundreds of functions available. I'll just scroll down until I get to some of the more stuff. So you can deal with lists and sets and strings, and there's all sorts of programming stuff. But always, it is quite straightforward to set up the really basic, just pick some numbers and do some simple calculations with them. That's what I was looking for. There's all the different kinds of functions there are. And again, extensions often add in more stuff on top of that. Okay, so we're getting towards not too much time left. So I think what I'll do is I'll stop there and I'll just see if anybody wants to go into anything in more detail. I haven't talked about the diagnostic test mode yet, which picks questions based on how you did previously. I'm sure there's lots of other stuff I haven't mentioned, but does anybody want to see anything else? while you're having a think about that, I will skip back to the, struggling with this Mac. I'll get back to the demos thing and I can quickly pull up some more demos. I said I'd get back to JSX Graph, didn't I? This demos project, by the way, is open to the public. I think you can get it by clicking that Explore button at the top. These are all the, this shows you all the content that's been published. There's a lot of just general questions created by Newcastle. There's a whole bank of stuff we've created to support students transitioning into university, into numerate subjects. And then, yeah, well, there's a big collection of how-tos as well. So there's the demos thing. Frosina, I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name wrong. I do need to check before your talk. Can you show how to see stats on students' results? So that is something provided by the Numbas LTI tool. I don't actually have something prepared that wouldn't violate data protection laws. I can maybe have a look in the documentation and see if there's some screenshots of things. So for the LTI tool, statistics. So there's a stats page. I don't know if there's a screenshot of it in here. No, but there's the remarking thing. You can see for each student's attempt, actually, there must be a screenshot there. For each student's attempt, you can click on the review button to go in and see it exactly as they saw it in the Numbas exam interface. You can see a timeline of what they did. So looked at this question, entered this answer, got this score. And then the stats page will show you things like the quartiles for the scores. It will show you a score graph for the whole exam and for each question, so you can get an idea of the distribution, and plots for times that students started and finished attempts, which we use quite often for timed exams. So I hope that answers that question. Masood has asked, is it possible to create workbooks like we saw this morning for the Helm into Stack project? Yes, certainly. And in fact, Don Shearman, who is giving a talk, probably not on that actually this week, is taking on that task of putting the Helm workbooks into Numbas. Yeah, so because you've got, where's the editor? There we are. You've got a rich text editor. You can put any sort of text you like in there. Ooh, this is hard for me to do. There we are. Keep going backwards until I find it. You can put whatever you like in here. You can put images, videos, text. It's LaTeX, by the way, for mathematical expressions. And again, in the editor, you get nice previews of what you're doing. That's not where backslash is on the Mac. There we go. What I didn't show was any questions with an advice section. Students really appreciate seeing a fully worked solution to a question, and you can do that here in Numbas. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully that answers that. But on that topic, actually, about workbooks with questions in, it's also possible to embed a single Numbas question into another page, which I know Chris does a lot with his lecture notes, and that we've done with the material we give for our pre-entry course. So that's another way of doing it. Flip it around, really. Okay, so what I'll try and do is keep going up to these demos. Wanted to show my Wizzy JSX graph questions because I'm really pleased with these. So I showed the plot of the function thing. Here's my Venn diagram question. So I have a reusable function within this question that creates a Venn diagram, and I use that to set up some questions here. So first of all, I've got a point here, and I have to have circles, and the subsets in the Venn diagram are positive numbers and even numbers. So a number can be one or both or none of those. I've got one thing here that I have to move around. I can say it is positive, it is even, it should go in the middle there. As I was dragging that around, those ticky boxes down there update. And in fact, this is a really important accessibility point. Not everyone can move stuff that easily. And so I can also just move things around by ticking the boxes. Again, I don't know how focus works on a Mac, but I'm going to get to it. Yeah, I can move that around with the keyboard as well. And that's updates automatically. So I want that in there. I'm going to submit my part now. There we are. Correct. Here we are. The same thing, but with lots of points. So I can, that's not positive or even, that's outside. That's positive. Positive. There we go. I got that right. So I've put those manually, and again, I could position all of these. And actually, it wasn't much work to set those up. What you do in Numbers is you say, you add in a couple of notes in the marking algorithm that say when the student moves something in the diagram, how should we update the answer input, and vice versa. When the student changes something in the input, what should the diagram end up looking like? Which again, I haven't shown in the editor, but I don't know if I will. Rosina asks, any helpful links on how to embed a numbers question into Canvas? There's something in the documentation actually about that. Where are we? So there's a whole page on how you deliver a numbers exam to your students. Canvas doesn't have a built-in SCORM player. So if you were wanted to track student attempts, like record their scores and all the data to do with their attempts, you would either need the Numbas LTI tool or one of the third-party SCORM players. I know that the Rustiki SCORM player is often installed on Canvas to support SCORM. SCORM is a really widely used standard, so you may already have something that can use it. But yeah, the Numbas LTI tool. The reason you need that's not just built in is that's storing some data, and we at Newcastle don't want to store everyone's data for a lot of reasons, resource and data protection. So it's some software you have to set up locally. We are able to help with getting that set up, or we can run the hosting as a contracted service if required. But quite often it's very easy and straightforward to set it up yourself for free and not involve us. Yeah, so Chris has pointed out we're in the last 5 minutes. We want to finish on the hour, so I'll just any more questions. Samira asks, can Numbers run through Brightspace? Yes, Brightspace does have a built-in SCORM player, but the feedback I've heard from institutions using it is it doesn't give you too many tools to look at student data in much detail. You can look at scores, but it doesn't really expose any of the anything more detailed than that, like what students wrote for each individual part input. So again, you could use the Numbers LTI tool with Brightspace if you wanted. But if you just want to get started with something without involving IT people, you can use the SCORM player in Brightspace. I will just zip through. I had a load of backup things. There's a good good page in the documentation about how you plan a question. I think even if you're not using Numbers, it's worth reading that to see some wisdom from our use of e-assessment. So I'll skip right to the end. I'll just have this on the screen so you can see those. We're very happy to get emails or for you to contact us through Twitter. There's a Numbers user group mailing list as well, linked through the website. Always happy to spend an hour or two helping you out. I do office hours every Thursday, so you can book some time to talk to me. Gareth has asked a question which I will try and answer in 2 minutes. In what situations would you use numbers, and in what situations would you use stack? I know that stack has a reputation as being the more mathematically capable system because it has maxima available, and certainly there are some computer algebra routines that are in maxima that are not in numbers yet. I think you don't really need them. Quite often when you're setting a question, you can either write it, there are two ways of writing a question. You can write it forwards, like and say, let's randomize a load of stuff and see what the answer would be. Or you can write it backwards and say, let's pick the answer at random and see what the what information we need to give the student to do that. And quite often, by choosing which way around you do it, you can avoid having to do a load of complicated stuff. But that hedging aside, there might well be cases where maxima has a built-in thing for manipulating whatever you want. But I think numbers and stack are pretty much equally capable these days. So I'm going to, as far as I've answered that question, not answer that question. I think you can make a free choice. Okay, so I think that maybe is the end. Do you want to take over, Chris?
Yeah, hang on.
Oh, sorry, did that just chuck you in it?
No, that's fine. I'm just trying to find the right slide. Where's that one, maybe? Is that the slide?
Yep.
Right. Thank you very much, Christian, for your time giving us that demo. Just to highlight what's on tomorrow. So we've got a numbers talk tomorrow morning. Christian mentioned the work of Don Shearman and Jim Pettigrew. So they're going to be talking about JSX graph in numbers. And then we've got a bit of free chat time tomorrow morning as well. If you're here Friday, we had a really good chat after Ben's session. So hopefully we can continue on tomorrow. And then in the afternoon, we have two more talks from Durham and Imperial. So look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and hope everyone has a good afternoon, evening, or night. Okay, thank you.